What if we were looking at China all wrong? Most people analyze China by looking at its economy, its military, and its tensions with Taiwan. But what if you are missing one crucial piece of the puzzle? What if the real key to understanding China's behavior isn't policy, but Xi Jinping's past? The media rarely pays attention to this, but once you learn about Xi's deepest traumas, everything about his rule suddenly starts to make sense. His crackdowns, his desire for control, his fear of vulnerability. Because behind China's most powerful leader is a man haunted by his past, a man who hates weakness, because he has felt weak too many times before. And in many ways, Xi is still running from his ghosts. Stick until the end, because once you'll see what shaped Xi's psychology, you'll understand China in a way most people never do. Now let's go back to where it all began. Xi Jinping was born into privilege. His father was a high-ranking Communist Party official. His childhood was pretty comfortable, until it wasn't. When Xi was just 9 years old, his world collapsed. During the Cultural Revolution, Mao Zedong turned against his father. The once powerful man was humiliated, stripped of everything, and thrown into prison. Xi's stepsister wasn't spared either. She couldn't take the persecution, and one day she committed suicide. And Xi himself? He was also detained. When he finally managed to escape, he ran to his mother and asked her for food. That's when she did something unthinkable. She reported him to the authorities. That was the China Xi grew up in. A world where fear and paranoia were breaking entire families from within. A place where nobody could be trusted. And that left a deep scar on him. A sense of vulnerability. And from that moment on, Xi swore he would never feel weak again. Now you might think that after all this, Xi would hate the Communist Party. But he didn't. Instead, he made a choice. He would get back inside the system and climb to its top. So Xi applied to join the Communist Party. Rejected. Applied again. Rejected. A third time. A fourth. A fifth. Rejected. 7 times he was turned away, all because of his father's disgrace. But Xi didn't give up. On his 8th try, he was finally accepted, and from that moment on, he played the game with ruthless precision. His first big break came in his late 20s, when he became the personal assistant of Zheng Biao, a top military general. This was after the Cultural Revolution. He was in his late 20s by then. His job? Carrying bags, taking notes, organizing schedules. But behind these humble tasks, Xi was doing something far more important. He was learning the military secrets. At meetings, Xi would write down key information, run to the toilet, memorize everything, and then burn the notes. That's how close to power he was. And most importantly, he was building relationships with the generals who controlled the PLA. This was when Xi learned his first and most important lesson. If you control the military, you can never be weak. For the rest of his career as a party official, Xi made sure to keep the army close. He gave them money, benefits, and power. He made sure veterans got generous pensions and that army officials' children got into the best schools. Even his marriage was a calculated move. His wife Peng wasn't just any woman. She was the most famous singer in the People's Liberation Army. With that marriage, Xi built just another bridge to the military world. These were all antidotes to his biggest fear, being weak again. But one of Xi Jinping's greatest traumas came later in life, while he was a party official in Fujian. It was 1991. The Soviet Union collapsed. To most of the world, this was a victory for democracy, the fall of a dictatorship. But to Xi, it was a nightmare. This was the model that had initially inspired China's communism, and now it was gone. To the West, Mikhail Gorbachev was a reformer. He loosened control, allowed more freedom of speech, let prohibited books return to the libraries. Suddenly, all Soviet citizens could learn about Stalin's crimes. They all could see how people in the West were living, and they started to question everything. To Xi, this wasn't progress. It was the suicide of a system. To him, the Soviet Union didn't collapse because it was too rigid. It collapsed because it was no longer rigid enough. Today, we still underestimate just how deeply the fall of the Soviet Union marked Xi's psyche. It was about more than geopolitics. It was about weakness. That one thing he hated the most. That's why in a speech in 2012, Xi famously said the Soviet Union collapsed because nobody was man enough to stand up and resist. He swore that would never happen to China. And that's why since coming to power, Xi has crushed internal dissent and reinforced censorship. To him, it's a matter of strength, a need for survival. In his psychology, when people lose faith in the system, that entire system will collapse. And this is also why today Xi is quietly pleased to see the Western world so polarized and divided. From his perspective, this cultural division is just another recipe for disaster. Just like Gorbachev's openness eroded the Communist Party's legitimacy, Xi sees Western democracies as crumbling under their own contradictions and extreme liberalism. As Sun Tzu once wrote, "Never interrupt your enemy when he's making a mistake." Last but not least, back in the days, Xi wasn't just shocked by Gorbachev's reforms. By the late 1980s, the Soviet Communist Party had rotten from within. Officials were corrupt, and the system had lost every sort of discipline. To Xi, this was just as dangerous as liberalism. This is why he launched China's biggest anti-corruption campaign ever. Since taking power, he had disciplined over 100,000 party members. It's not a coincidence that every day headlines in China announce another high-ranking official removed from corruption. He is obsessed with ensuring that the CCP remains a unified, credible, and disciplined institution. Otherwise, weakness will find him again. So now when you see Xi Jinping's crackdowns, you will understand the psychology behind them. Xi is running from his own ghosts. He saw what happened when power is lost. He saw it first in his own life, when his family was destroyed in the Cultural Revolution, and then he saw it again when the Soviet Union crumbled from within. And he is even seeing it today in the Western world. And the only lesson he learned is that real strength can only come from absolute control. Keep that in mind when you try to understand why China behaves in a certain way today. See you in the next video.